I realize I'm the only thing standing between you and networking, or as some of you call it, happy hour. And I am also very thankful I'm not following Second City. So that's, W.C. Fields once said a long time ago, you never want to follow an act that has dogs and children in it. And we can add the third one to that as Second City. If you look at my bio just really quickly, I was 9 years with Hay Management Consultants. I was an assessment psychologist for executives, both for selection and development, and I also worked in the organization effectiveness group. I was recruited to Amico some time ago as their first guinea pig of what it would look like to have a change agent for top executives who wanted to creatively and constructively disrupt the organization. As you'll see in a few minutes, Amico at that point of its history was at a point of maturity where it was the middle of the pack. And it kept being the middle of the pack until they were acquired. I was there as part of the integration team between BP and Amico. I will tell you a few stories about that. I'll tell you about the disruption of 20,000 people being laid off. After that, I went on to my own. I decided not to go back to a large consulting firm, and I was recruited to eventually move into executive coaching, which at first I said I was never going to do. And my colleagues asked, well, why is that? And I said, a couple of books were written and 10,000 people raised their hands and declared themselves executive coaches, and I wouldn't have my dog talk to most of those people. So we've come a little ways. We're still in our adolescence, but I wanted to give you those because some of the reference points I'm going to be talking about today is from the perspective of somebody where I was at Amico. I was on the HR council. I was with my HR generalists and specialists trying to work through change. So I live with the consequences of my recommendations. Not all consultants externally do that. Sometimes called seagulls, they fly down, they poop on you, and then they leave, right? So I've been on both sides of the desk. What I'd like to do today is I'm assuming that all of you in some capacity are leaders and you coach leaders. And that's the target today. So what I'd like to do is have at the beginning a tee-up of a video about what our employees see about disruption. And then what I'd like to do also is find out what the experience has been in this room. We'll have a little bit of fun of that. You've seen Family Feud. Today we're going to have a very short version of HR Feud. And then I'm going to show you a model that we created that I'm very passionate about. It came up in my coaching around 2009 after the 2008 recession hit. And I kept talking to leaders about saying, our employees are not engaged and we're having enough trouble trying to get the business to move forward. What do we do? And so we created a model that I'm going to show you today. And hopefully that model will work for both you and the executives that you coach. It's sort of a development plan, if you will, because most development plans in executive coaching are basically reference points. My job is to make people more self-aware and self-correcting. They need a standard by which to do that self-assessment. And so today I'm going to show you 6 roles that leaders can implement in order to reduce the negative effects of employee reactions to disruption. But first, this word from our video. I didn't start collecting headlines until about 2011. And then I skipped through, otherwise we'd still be here looking at the video. I skipped through 2013. It was really depressing. I hate to be Debbie Downer. But after a while, there's an accumulative effect of people seeing these headlines every week. Sometimes there's 2 every week. And I think if your experience is similar to mine, at some point around after 2008, you knew someone or several people who had lost their job or been significantly disrupted by the recession. And now what we see currently is the new normal is while jobs are coming back, pay is not going up. And a lot of people are working part-time, all right? So people are looking over their shoulder, and we have a lot of distracted employees. And so what's interesting to me today is I'm going to walk you through how a model in a few moments that shows you that disruption is part of the normal business cycle. It's not to be avoided. We're going to have to figure out how to deal with it because it's coming, whether we want it to or not. Then number 2, I'll show you the other model. But before we get to that, what I'd like to do is let's play HR Feud. So here's the question. When I was asked to speak to this conference, this is the basic question of the whole conference. It's basically, what disruptions are you anticipating that will be rocking your organization and HR in the coming years? So here's what I'd like to do. And we're going to do this very quickly. I know the people in this room are very competitive, so we're going to have a prize, or several prizes. It's Dr. Gia's Consultant in the Box. This is your home play version in case you're bored here, okay? But here's what I'd like you to do. At your seats, you can just organize yourselves, find 2 or 3 other people, form a little team, and in the next 3 minutes, what I'd like you to do is answer the question, what do you predict will be the most common answer to that question in terms of the most frequent disruption people are experiencing in this room? In other words, from your business, why did you come here? What disruption are you experiencing? So here's the question again. What disruptions are you anticipating that will be rocking your organization in HR in the coming years? What do you think will be the most common answer in the room? Pick 2 or 3 people. See if you can pick one answer. Have a spokesperson. You've got 3 minutes. It sounds like you all have an opinion, so why don't we get to work here? Otherwise, the networking gets even shorter. Exactly. Exactly. All right, so what we'd like you to do is throw out an answer. If someone has already said the answer that you're about to give, and that's not your primary answer, let another team respond, okay? So we don't want to have a lot of duplication. Who'd like to go first? We're going to go down here, the courageous people in the front row.
That's right. That's why we sit here.
All right, so aging workforce, there was retirements, loss of institutional knowledge, loss of...
you get to pick one.
Loss of institutional knowledge.
Ah, loss of institutional knowledge. Forget that aging population. Yes? Financial turbulence and the impact of it on the business.
Lack of communication.
Lack of communication. There was somebody over here who was patient. Yes?
Engagement with the culture.
Engagement with the culture. In the back.
Responding to technology changes.
Responding to technology changes. Are we getting all these down?
Yes.
Okay. Yes?
Millennials, being able to engage them and prepare them for real-life work.
Being able to prepare millennials for life's work. Yes?
Inability to execute on strategy.
Inability to execute on strategy. Yes? Retention. Yes?
We said the war for talent.
War for talent. Yes?
We talked about changing the way employees are engaging with corporations.
Okay, changing how employees are engaging with corporations. I'm sorry, I cut you off. Did you lose some more?
So, yeah, because they're not joining corporations, they're doing their own thing. They're exploring other.
They're not a lot. Yeah, okay. They're not identifying with the corporations. Right, exactly. Yes, I'll get to you in a second.
We said limited talent pool, so internally and externally.
Limited talent pool internally and externally. And last one.
Define succession planning and processes surrounding it.
I'm sorry, defining succession planning?
And all the processes
All the processes, and I didn't mean to ignore you in the back.
Reorganization.
Reorganizations, and one more.
Benefits.
Benefits. All right, here's how we're going to play. Think now of your own reference point of your own company. And what do you think is the primary disconnect, the disruptor that your business is facing, the biggest challenge? Pick one. And now let's see where they end with the answers. Okay, so.
What we've written down.
Yes, and you can read your own writing. Okay, what I like to do is take them one at a time, and then we'll see how many people have that as their primary disruptor.
Aging workforce.
Aging workforce. How many people have that as their primary? Maybe two. Okay.
Loss of institutional knowledge.
Loss of institutional knowledge. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 as their primaries. 7.
7. Okay. Lack of communication.
Lack of communication. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, keep going.
Engagement with culture.
Engagement with culture. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Responding to technology changes.
Responding to technology changes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay?
Millennials.
Millennials. Everybody's hands go up. 3, 4, 4.
Okay. Inability to execute strategy.
Inability to execute strategy. 2, 3, 4. Okay?
Retention.
Retention. Oh, don't retain. Okay. Put your hands up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
War for talent.
War for talent. And there's a lot of wars here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18.
Wow.
Wow is right.
It's kind of similar. Limited talent pool.
Okay. Limited talent pool. Kind of similar.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Maybe we went with the other one. Okay, and?
Defining succession planning.
Okay, succession planning and all its processes that are defined by it, right? Well, somebody said it. Okay, not many. Let's go.
Reorganization.
Reorganization. 2, 3, 4. We got 4.
And benefits.
Benefits. 2, 3. So what's our winning, most frequent disruptor?
War on talent.
War on talent. And who is the group that came up with that? Wow. Don't go home and tell your spouse or partner that you can read minds, okay? Because that just gets you into more trouble. What was the second most?
Retention.
Retention. Which group came up with retention? All right. How many people are there? 5. Okay. 4. There you go. And the third one?
Responding to technology changes.
Which group came up with that topic?
Right here.
Nobody oh, okay. How many of you are you?
4.
Okay, I have only 3, so somebody. Okay. Very good. What did you just observe? It's a pretty diverse set of disruptions, aren't there? Not everybody came with the same one. Let's talk a little bit. I'm going to move you now to the next piece, which is, you know what? You're going to experience different disruptions based on where you are in the business maturity cycle. So let's just take a look at this. I'm going to give you business maturity cycle, the 2-minute drill. So kids, hang on to your diapies. Here we go. Those of you who are parents know what that reference is too. This is a model that was created a few years ago, probably about 30 years ago, by Itzhak Adizes, and I have modified it. He's an organizational person. I'm a psychologist by training. I am a business person who happens to be a psychologist, so I take a slightly different slant at this. And I also coach a lot of executives who are dealing with rapid change. But I'm going to walk you through this. My wife claims that she had a great idea of spray-on tan. Never did anything with it. It was just a dream. If I only. Startup. You're really not at the startup phase unless you've got skin in the game, unless you've got something at risk, unless you've put money in, unless there's a downside for you. The big challenge there in survival is once you get an idea, finding a market for it. Instead of having a product in search of a market, you have a market that's willing to buy what you're willing to offer, whether it be a service or a product. The problem here is that if you're too committed to your own idea, and entrepreneurs are great at coming up with lots of ideas. If you're too committed to your idea, you'll end up not being able to sell it. When you do find something where there's proof of concept in the marketplace, you move up to unbridled rapid growth. All of a sudden, it's onesies and twosies, starts to become a wave of demand for your services or your products. What you need at that point is an additional role. You need someone who's a driver, someone who gets stuff done. So while the entrepreneur tends to be more of an idea person, the driver actually goes out and makes the sales. What happens in unbridled growth as you keep scaling up is there's no structure. There are no processes. And as I worked with a CEO who inherited one of these, I asked him what the current condition was, and he said there's 2,000 people, and we're all going 200 miles an hour in different directions. There's no coordination. What happens here is you carry some of the practices here of selling just to stay alive to selling really unprofitable business. And what happens here is you start making promises you can't keep. What happens there? Fatal arrogance. You start telling people you can do things you can't, and you get into other businesses that you shouldn't be in. Disruptive? Absolutely. And so what I'm trying to demonstrate at each level is there is a challenge to disruption that each level of the business needs to get through. Up here you add an additional role now. So now you have the entrepreneur, you have the person who's the driver, and now you bring in the administrator, the person who comes in and likes to bring structure and processes to everything. Do they all get along? No. No. What does the driver want to do? Get the heck out of my way and let me get something done. What does the entrepreneur want to do? I got all these ideas of other things we could be doing, right? And now we got the administrator going, whoa, 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 wait a minute. We got to do this in a systematic, predictable, structured kind of way, all right? So what happens here is there's a disruption in those relationships. What can often happen is if they don't get along, they can drive the business, they can eject the entrepreneur because he or she is becoming a pain, right? We don't need more ideas. We need to execute. That was somebody's idea, right? Or you can have a premature decline. We just get so locked up with arguing with each other that we lose sight of the business. Here's the sweet spot. It's hard to get to and it's hard to stay at. That little green dot talks about the fact that you finally have processes in place. You finally have an entrepreneur who's giving you reasonable ideas. You finally have a driver who's focused on the fewest things that are making the greatest difference, that are most profitable. Strategy at this point is very interesting. People confuse this. Strategy is about choosing things to do that will allow you to win and choosing not to do things you can do, but you can't win at. People go, why aren't we doing that? We can do that. No, we can't win at that. This lasts only so long, and then what happens is if you're doing really well, competitors catch up. Other people start to mimic it. So this is where Amico was when I started with them. This is where they were when we finished. They were the middle of the pack. What happens at the top of the curve, over here, this is driven by the entrepreneurs. Over here, this starts being driven by the structure and by the administrators, right? So what happens in the declining side over here is at this point we start resting on past laurels, all right? An example, let's take a look at some companies recently. Kraft divided the baby in half, right? Part of it went to its traditional foods, part of it went to snacks. Here's an example. Kraft can actually, for those of you who have kids, and the kids love macaroni and cheese, and you're afraid of giving kids too much macaroni and cheese because it's not healthy for them, Kraft does have a way, they have found a way in their test kitchens to produce healthy macaroni and cheese that's whole grain, that's taste equivalent to the original macaroni and cheese. Gee, isn't that great? Why aren't we doing it? Because the financial people said it's not as profitable. So we're not going to go ahead and do that. Now it's different than ConAgra, which carries healthy choice. Why did ConAgra have healthy choice? It had a CEO who had a heart attack, and his doctor told him if you didn't eat better, you're going to die. Started a whole product line, okay? This is what happens over here is the entrepreneurs begin to lose power and the administrators start gaining more power. And then what you have over here is you start gaining more inward preoccupation and decline. We start fighting amongst ourselves, right? I mean, I'm imagining that's probably happening in some of the companies that we see that are in death spins right now. Sears just seems to be going in the wrong direction. There's never ever good news coming out of Sears. And then down here we have rigidity, okay? And this is where most of us who've ever had to deal with a bureaucratic organization that is completely inflexible, I'm sure you all have a favorite in your mind. That's what happens down here, okay? What I'm trying to demonstrate through this is that there are natural disruptions through the whole cycle. There's never a time where everything doesn't have tension in it. And there's always somebody fighting with somebody for power or the dynamics change. So what we need to be able to do as we're going through this is to be able to lead employees through this. So as I started to work with these CEOs and other leaders and my HR partners in the organizations, as one of my very senior executives told me a long time ago, Enrique Sosa, who was the head of the chemical company, in his wonderful Spanish, his wonderful Cuban accent, he said, keep it simple. So we tried to keep this model simple. So what we're going to show you are the 5 most frequent employee reactions that we want to minimize, that we want to control, that we want to influence. We want to increase our employees' capability of coping and increase their ability to continue to contribute. So we call these the 5 factors. These are the things that we're trying to work on. And then we'll talk very quickly about the 6 roles that you and your senior executives can model and demonstrate and dial up to help engage the employees. This should look vaguely familiar to you. Remember Maslow's hierarchy of needs? If any of you have been through a period where you don't know if 2 months from now you have a job or not, this gets very real. You're looking over your shoulder and you're wondering, I'm working my butt off, is this all worth something, right? What happens is there's only so much so I'm not going to sound like a psychologist. There's only so much psychological and emotional energy that people have. And when you start worrying about, am I going to be able to pay the mortgage? Am I ever going to be able to pay the bills? Am I going to be able to save money for my kids' college education? Am I going to be able to have health insurance in 3 weeks? I don't know. It's a little disruptive, to say the least. So this is one of the things that we want to mitigate. Loss of a sense of personal effectiveness. Martin Seligman did this research about 30 years ago, and I incorporated it originally into my dissertation. Part of my dissertation at the University of Chicago was on occupational stress in DCFS workers. Pretty rich target. This is basically the idea of, he called it learned helplessness. You get to a certain point where you feel like no matter what I do, it doesn't matter anymore. And he was the person who did the original work on burnout. People finally just, at the most extreme examples, just give up, okay? We want to alleviate this, if at all possible, as well. There's been research done over the last 30 years about an implied employment contract. It's not written. It's basically the expectations and perceptions that employees bring with them when they come in to a job. And that expectation is basically, well, if you hire me and I do basically what you ask me to do, and I perform at the level of requirements, you'll take care of me and provide me with employment and pay me on a regular basis. What happens when they begin to see people laid off, and some of those people were those people who came to work every day, did what we asked them to do, but for no reason, no responsibility or accountability of their own, they were selected, they were in the wrong place at the wrong time in the wrong organization, they got laid off. All of a sudden people say, whoops, game's changed. There isn't a contract. I could come to work every day and work very, very hard, and I could still be damaged as a result of this. We want to mitigate some of that. This one should seem very obvious. Probably in this most extreme form, when you take a look at research that's been done on, by the way, for those of you in the back, it's become less focused on quality and productivity. This is basically, when you see there's been some research done on mergers and acquisitions, and some acquisitions, they actually track this. For the next 3 months after the acquisition in the acquired company, productivity went down 30%. Were people still showing up for work? Yeah. But what were they doing while they were there for 8 or 10 hours? other things than producing, right? They were talking to each other. They were trying to figure out what was going on. They were trying to figure out if they had a job, all the other things that distract them. And then finally, becoming disillusioned with the business leadership. Do they see what I see when I'm dealing with our customers? Do they hear what I hear from our vendors? Don't they understand? And this is the sort of the old thing, right? Everybody sitting deeper in the organization goes, I don't know what they're smoking on the weekend, but if I were king, I'd be doing this differently, right? And people start wondering, do they really know what they're doing in the corner office, on the C-suite, in Mahogany Row? So these are the 5 factors that we want to think about. How can we mitigate these? How can we reduce these? What can we do to get employees at a higher level of coping and still producing on the job in a reasonable kind of way? So I'm going to show you 6 rules that will help you get there. And I warn you, there's no rocket science involved in this, okay? One of my jobs as a coach, someone once said to me, and I took it as a compliment, they said, you have the gift of the obvious. And if I can take fairly complex ideas and make it so obvious, the person goes, well, of course I would do that, then I'm there. My question to them is, if it's so obvious, why aren't you doing it? So what I'm about to show you is a development plan that you can use with other people, and there's no rocket science involved, but it's to get them to do it on a regular basis. The first one is a role model of effective coping. You would be surprised how many senior executives that I coach that I have to remind that everybody's watching. They're on stage 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. When they sneeze, a bunch of other people get cold. The way I describe it to them is there are some people who see you on a daily basis. Some people see you hourly. Maybe your assistant. There are some people who see you once a week. And there are some people who see you once every 6 months. And they see you for a soundbite. And they judge you by what they see. Remember when we're about to go through it again, the presidential elections and you and I work all day, we come home, we look at the news, and there's a 15-second soundbite that the news has decided that that's going to define that person for that day. That's not fair. But the same thing happens to our leaders is people get a little soundbite, and they look at them and they go, do they look worried? Should I be worried? Do they look tired? What's going on? Do they look confident? And we send off all kinds of nonverbal behavior that people judge us by. So I have to work with people around their executive presence. And an example that I had recently in coaching someone was an executive who came in and he had a very mature business and he needed to incrementally move it back towards that green dot. And so what happened was he was a very analytical guy. He was very smart and he did, in fact, recover the business. The problem was he'd come into the office at the beginning of the day so wrapped up in his own ideas that he walked into the office like this. No eye contact with anybody. And when I got involved with him, he had all this great business results, but his employee engagement scores were in the toilet. And so I started asking around, and people said, he doesn't really, he just kind of stays in his office. So part of what we had to do was have him go out and schedule regularly going out and walking around and discovering, how are your kids doing? I know your kids, and connecting with people. I mean, this is not rocket science, but we had to actually I said, if you don't schedule it, the urgent will always overtake the important, right? So we had to do that. So a role model of effective coping. When you do things and say things, I've seen it even worse than that. I actually had a general counsel who I was asked to coach because he was screaming in the office with one of the operations managers. I mean, this is like, kids, you got to stop this. So part of this is, there's a downside to this, but part of this is being able to exhibit executive presence, confidence, and being able to tell people and talk to people. I use the metaphor, talk to your people, talk to the employees as if they were a neighbor you cared about. Be genuine, be honest, and be balanced. And that's what we're going to talk about in just a few minutes. A reality anchor. What happens when our executives, our leaders, are not communicating? Folks? Rumors everywhere, in the parking lot, in the cafeteria, at the water cooler. Rumors fill in a vacuum where there's no communication about where we're going. And for some people, unfortunately, it's innocent. They're just trying to find out. People are interested in rumors. They're trying to find, what you heard? You hear anything? What's going on? Unfortunately, we also have a few of those very disturbed people who like to be the center of attention and spread rumors like crazy, right? What we need to do is we need to be able to work with people and set a cultural expectation that we're not going to convey information unless it's been verified and with your management. We basically, I call them deputies. For rumor deputies is getting people to ask people things like, when did Gary become a resource on the finances of this company? Right? Challenge people in a quiet way and let them know that if they're not part of the solution, they're becoming part of the problem. We're just disrupting ourselves and the water's coming in the lifeboat faster than it was coming in before. A counselor with empathy. People need to be listened to. It doesn't mean that we need to say, oh, it's awful, but one of the things that I learned as a clinician years ago was to let people know that their reaction was normal was very relieving to a lot of people. Like, I'm worried about all this stuff. I can understand that. We're all facing a lot of uncertainty. And, by the way, so it's yes and, right? Yes, and by the way, I still need you to do your job, the team needs you, and the company still needs you. So we can have both the emotional reactions, and I need you to be able to continue to contribute. And that's what the next piece is. Please, please, remember, you know, having people understand they're an important part of a team. They're an important contribution, and reinforcing that. And then the other piece here is a manager who sets short-term goals and objectives. Remember this piece up here? Loss of a sense of personal effectiveness. The first thing you do with somebody who's burned out is you get them moving on things they can accomplish. And this doesn't know any layer in the organization. This even works with executives. Sometimes executives say, well, you know what? This thing is bigger than I am. I really don't control this. And what we do in coaching is we say, okay, what can you influence and what can you control? Let's start there. You get people doing things that have a result, that have an effectiveness. And so some of this is setting short-term goals and achievable, short-term objectives and achievable goals. What you also need to do here is not just reward end results, but reward progress. We forget to do that. And then here's the final piece that I'd like to spend a little bit more time on, which is a communicator sharing a repeatable story. So let's just talk about that for a second. Do your employees care about EBITDA? Do they care about profit margin, market share? We'd like them to. We publish it to them. Does it get them excited? Does it get them depressed? No, absolutely not. Why do all the major religions in the world convey their values through stories? Because the human beings, because of our advanced cerebral cortex, we attribute more meaning and including to that emotions. And we emotionally load our memory based on those stories. So what I'd like to do is just spend a minute talking about why the repeatable story is important. And what you're trying to do with a repeatable story is get everybody in the organization to get their version of the repeatable story. So they can tell their spouses, they can tell their partners, they can tell their kids, whoever's important in their life, this is why I'm so stressed and this is what we're trying to do. Oh, and by the way, some people say, can I just do one role? Can I do a couple of roles? I'm not good at some of the others. When I sat down with an expert panel, we kind of ran through this and we said, what's correlated with what? And what you begin to see is different roles tag up with different parts of the 5 factors. So it's kind of like competency models. You can't have like 3/4 of them. If you really have a distinguishing competency model, the competencies synergistic with each other, you need to have them all. So my suggestion is try and optimize all 6 of the roles, because at some point you're getting the most maximum effect and the bang for the buck in those 5 factors. So let's talk about what's in the repeatable story. And we're going to publish this so you don't have to take copious notes. But this has worked. This is field tested. This works really well. It's very, very simple, but it's very hard to answer. What is our situation? Starting off with, you know, we're kind of on the decline. I mean, let's be honest with each other. The business ain't what it used to be. Or we're going up, but we're out of control. We got people going 200 miles an hour in different directions. We're not organized at all. What's the problem we must solve? How you frame that problem is going to define that very carefully and give people very different views on what they're going to be able to do. We'll talk about, for example, McDonald's in a second, and I bring it up in a very positive way. What are we going to do to solve this problem? So let's go back to this issue. We may have a product line where people don't feel that the food is as good as it could be, that we have good ingredients. What are you going to do to solve this? We're going to go and analyze what we can do to do that and test it in the marketplace. It may take us 6 or 9 months. This isn't going to happen overnight. Part of what you want to convey to people is we have very serious senior people who are looking at this, and we're not going to have a knee-jerk response. We're going to be thoughtful, we're going to be thorough, but we are taking action. And part of the communication on this is you can't just give people a story at the end. You have to give them progress reports. People say, well, what? I thought a month ago you said you guys were working on this in a special project. Yeah, we are. We are making progress, but we want to make sure that whatever we present out there is something that's really going to be flying and going to be sustainable. Remember a few years ago, there was Beckhart came up with a model of organizational change. And he said you need a couple of components in the formula. The first one is you need dissatisfaction with the current state. Then you need a better future state that everybody wants to go to. And when you look at the gap between those two, people go, whoa, how are we ever going to get there? And you need to be able to show them the first steps of how they get there, right? So this is what we need from you. We need you to keep your nose to the grindstone, keep working on the job, be part of the team, help us, give us time to find a new direction and do things differently. What you can expect from us. We will give you progress reports, even when there is nothing new to say. That's the biggest problem I have with senior executives. They say, well, we have nothing else to say. There's nothing new. It's okay. It's also okay not to know yet. Well, we don't have the problem solved. It's okay to say you're working on it and you don't know yet. That's fine. People just need to know you're paying attention. That's where the credibility of senior executives come in. So McDonald's obviously is a company that's been immensely successful. And as you heard from Lisa in the last presentation, they continue a very long history of innovation in education. I mean, they've just been doing it constantly. They're held up as the gold standard in many ways. Despite all of that, they are going through their own disruption at this point. And here's what our employees are seeing. So I took some headlines from just the last couple months. Chicago Tribune, McDonald's turnaround efforts not working. A week later, the CEO is gone. Same day, Cranes announces that McDonald's corporate headquarters cuts over 100 jobs. So it's not just, but what I also want to say is that the thing about disruption is it's not just the lower levels of the organization. It affects senior executives as well, and it affects particularly your high potentials, because we lean on them all the time, and then when things get disrupted, we lean on them even more. They're likely to burn out too. We need to be careful about the care and feeding of high potentials. So this is what came out in the Wall Street Journal. I'm not loving it. I wanted to get an Egg McMuffin, and I was asked to dance with a stranger. And then they listed all of the things that McDonald's is struggling with from a business perspective. And these are what the executives are saying. So here's my challenge to you over the networking. I just want to do this as a thought provoker, okay? We're not insiders. I know this week Easterbrook met with his franchisees and with the senior managers and started talking about what they're doing. The only thing we know in the press so far is kale. I doubt that's the whole story. So part of this is, if you were an HR senior executive at McDonald's, I'm going to skip that. If you were a senior executive, HR executive at McDonald's, what would you advise the senior executives to do to start building a repeatable story? How would they communicate differently? How would they engage the employees? How would they engage the community? So I just suggest to you, I come to these conferences often as a participant as well as a presenter. I try and walk away with a nugget from each one. You're lucky if you get a couple of good nuggets. And what I'm hoping is that at least this repeatable story outline is a useful process for you to start asking people, how do we answer these questions in our organization? And that, folks, is it.